Sure. Hey, good morning. Thank you all for making it here today. The first item on the agenda is for the committee to select, since it's the first committee meeting it's for the committee to select a chair and vice chair of the meetings. And the bylaws for the committee state that the board members who serve on the committee shall serve as chair and vice chair. So, and then just again, to help orient, is Michael's new to this committee. The other three of you have served on it last year. And Michael's been appointed as the alternate, although he can absolutely contribute to any item when it comes to formal votes. If the primary resident is here, the alternate can't cast a vote. If the primary resident is not here, then the alternate would cast a vote as the resident member. So sorry if I can. We'll collaborate.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah,
would you like to put on? All right. There you go. And I'll be the vice chair.
Next item on the agenda is self-contained breathing apparatus school replacement.
So there's a report for this item that we sent out yesterday. If you in case you didn't see it, the hard copy's been placed in your space. Before we get into the details and the chief can kind of outline what's proposed, I wanted to kind of discuss why that's on today's agenda and why we think we need to move forward with some direction today. And there are really two reasons for this. One, in the broader sense, we have been attempting to get a grant to replace dated SCBA units, and we've not been successful in receiving grant funding. And we have some history of equipment being unreliable, and in one case fairly recently malfunctioning during a specific incident which the chief can address. The second issue, and the reason why it would have been here either way, is, and we'll get into this a little bit later in the meeting, we are preparing to receive the new Type 1 fire engine. And our request for this, our grant request, including some district matching funds, is to include the engine being fully outfitted. So all of the equipment that comes on the engine will be part of that purchase. So we'll need to be putting SCBA units on that engine, and they were part of the grant application. So it was anticipated that the grant would cover 75% of the cost of these SCBA units that go on the engine. It's important that the district's equipment has compatibility with one another. Right now, we have these older Scott units, and again, the chief can talk about the differences. And we want to make sure that whatever goes on the new engine is compatible with the other district equipment. And so if there's a time to change the type of equipment we maintain, now is the time to make that decision. It does not make sense to have a different style of SCBAs on one engine than the rest of the department maintains on all the other equipment in their facility. So that's kind of that's the reason for the timing today, and needing to make a decision about how we move forward with the SCBA units, so that ultimately we can order the right pieces of equipment, so that when the engine arrives, we can outfit it and put it to use. So and then I asked the chief to kind of outline, what's being proposed or what's being discussed for some of the challenges.
Yeah, so currently we have roughly, I'll say 16 units. Out of the 16 units, I think we have about 12 that are serviceable that we can use. 4 of them have kind of been benched to some degree, and we're robbing them for some parts and those types of things to keep the other units going. They've been having difficulty for a while now. And that's why for the last 3 years, I've been putting in for the AFG grant to try and get new units funded through that grant. To no success. Unfortunately, it's pretty competitive, and we just didn't rise to the top of the list with regards to their minimums. The SCBA's are Scott 4.5s. We've given an approximate age there of 20 years. There is a little bit of question there. They're going to be anywhere from 14 to 20 years. But NFPA standards are 15 years, OSHA standards are 15. That say you need to really replace these things after 15 years. So we're right there. And I think due to the fact that we hadn't reached maybe the 15-year mark with some of them, is why we potentially didn't get the grants. But even with that, again, it's been a very competitive process with AFG. We've been sending these in probably on an average of 2 to 3 per month for different types of failures, regulator failures, leaks, strap failures, the bags that hold our buddy breathing systems. Those are a required replacement. They won't even send them back to us if those are torn or not working. And we've been having a lot of those. The masks are starting to fail on a regular basis. The plastic over time gets cracked and hard, and the locking components for the regulators will start to break, the regulators themselves, and then the straps and the head pieces on the masks are also starting to break. As I mentioned in the report, we just recently had a situation where we had a face piece fail on a firefighter right before entry into an IDLH, immediately dangerous to life and health atmosphere. And that could have been catastrophic inside the actual structure. Sorry. Or the environment. So, with that said, one of my captains gave me a written letter indicating the failure, kind of documented how it happened, what happened, and this just kind of pushed the envelope on why we need to replace these. Again, as the general manager mentioned, these are dated and failing. I've given a pretty good rundown of the ones that we want to replace. We're looking to replace 9 of the 16 with the asset replacement portion. And then the 4 others would be through the grant purchase on the new engine. We're looking to replace a RIC pack on the asset replacement portion, and then 1 RIC pack on the engine funded portion. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat this morning. We're also looking at on the engine purchase to purchase all the chargers that would be necessary for all the units, since that can come out of capitals. Again, you know, as I mentioned in the report, these are necessary, you know, for PPE, personal protective equipment. We can't really do our job if our guys aren't confident in these pieces of equipment. So it's one of those situations where we're at that point, and I think we've been getting to that point for the last couple of years that we needed to replace these. And so I'm just asking for the committee's support to take this to the full board to get the funding to replace the 9, and then we can get into the equipment replacement. And I don't want to confuse them or muddy the waters, but the 4 that will be on the engine will also be on the next report for the equipment replacement. I'm available for any questions.
Mr. Mine. Aside, how much funding do we have currently in replacement?
About 750,000.
In asset replacement.
And for the grant, we were just authorized for. Pull more.
Well, the grant is just gonna be engine equipment. I'm putting together the whole list and then that portion of it will be about 232,000. 233,000.
Backups on that, 75%.
Four of those will be within that 233,000.
So I think to your question, when we submitted our grant application and our estimate of costs, including all the equipment that goes on the engine, we included 4 SCBA. I mean, if your question is, could we buy 5?
Yes.
I mean,
Oh,
I think,
no.
so I think it becomes a little challenging. We're expecting a very rigorous review from USDA as it relates to every nickel that is spent. And when we made our request, it was to add a fully equipped engine to the fleet. And so all the equipment that would go on that engine, there would be no more than 4 SCBA's kept on that engine. So I think that it might be challenging.
So to kind of add on to that, coattail on that, the engine itself and typically the way that these federal funding agencies look at purchases on that type of stuff is you have to have a spot for a seat for SCBA's. The new engine will have 3 SCBA seats and then a compartment for the engineer's SCBA. So a total of 4. We'd have a hard time putting 5 on there without a space for it.
$750,000.
Yeah, and I wanna clarify, actually, your budget adjustment that you just, $750,000 was our. If you give me 1 second, I was gonna confirm something, so I'm not working off memory.
So the capital asset.
Yeah,
is
just give me
different.
just, yeah,
Okay, it's
please,
different than-
yes.
Oh,
Give me just a second, I wanna make sure I'm quoting the right figure.
Capital has a little over 2 million.
Fire department.
Capital is strictly for new equipment,
Right.
added equipment, so.
The
that's
2 million
strictly-
is
yes,
strictly in the fire
yes, yes. Yeah, it's capital for the fire department. Not a general capital. That comes from development. Companies.
Hamster on the Wi-Fi system is working. So
9%.
oh, yeah, I don't know, it's really, it's,
The last couple of days has been bad.
maybe it's our stormy weather.
You're talking about we're waiting, so is it, are the new units, are they compatible with like CAL FIRE, Tesker, El Paso, are they, you're
That's-
looking at the same? I know they have the universal
Well, we
rescue.
don't have the universal connection with the current ones.
Right.
The new ones, yes, both Paso and Atascadero have MSAs and CAL FIRE has currently.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That's,
Yeah.
if we're to replace them, then the recommendation is to change the style of unit so that there's more interoperability with the neighboring agencies. Back to your, the question at hand about balances. So the asset replacement fund, is expected for fire. Is expected to end the year, was expected to end the year with about, I'm sorry, about $860,000 would be the the July 1st balance. However, you made an adjustment at your meeting just a couple of days ago to increase that balance further by taking the funds that we got that were associated with the engine use at the 2 out-of-county assignments this year and further depositing them, and I believe that was about $100,000 additional. So you've got closer to $1 million in asset replacement money, that would be your expected minimum balance before you make another purchase. Now, even though I think that we're certainly better than we've been in many years, we've really been able to improve that balance. This is far short of a comfortable number. That number should be $2-3 million in this account at all times. We need to be able to replace very expensive equipment on potentially short notice. And so even though that sounds like a big number and it is what's recommended to be utilized, it's in the big picture an uncomfortably low figure.
When you say equipment, so that's what my next question was. What do you foresee us replacing with this?
Engine, we've got a very old, our engine that's gonna be placed in reserve status will need to be replaced.
It comes from the capital.
The new engine is that now we're going from maintaining one structure fire engine to two.
But that is,
So, yeah, so when you look at equipment, it's not, you don't have apparatus separate, you're bunching it all together.
Exactly, and our current policy is, so this is exclusive to the fire fund, so don't worry about any other district operations. The asset replacement funds are maintained by funds, so we're talking about the fire fund only. And our current policy is that asset replacement can be utilized for equipment or apparatus or anything that's got a long duration that has a purchase cost more than $5,000.
Yeah.
That's a very low figure too, but so it's not just replacing the apparatus, it's also major upgrades or repairs to the apparatus, like when the transmission fail or need to be replaced, we use asset replacement money. When there's assets at the or equipment at the fire station that needs to be replaced, let's say an HVAC unit goes out, we would use asset replacement fund. So this is not exclusive to just equipment or just apparatus or just the station, but all of those together. And that's why this type of operation where you have pieces of equipment that cost in excess of $1 million that you know you're going to need to replace, this balance would need to be much higher. So even though I'm telling you that I'm much more comfortable than where we've been in this balance, it's woefully low. And so don't look at that $800,000 or $900,000 as some sort of slush. It really, we need to work hard over time to build that up so that you never question when a piece of apparatus needs to be replaced, that whether you've saved money for it already. Because
and this was the reason we previously couldn't get a new engine until we couldn't
We had
afford
two-
it.
yeah, we had
Then
two
we
sort
had,
of- yeah,
we
two
had
sort
to
of-
change our master plan that indicated that we could have 2 fire engines. That's what we were able to bring on the second one.
we got the grant funding.
Grant and that money is coming from the capital.
Yeah, the grant match.
Because it's an expansion.
Yeah, so the second engine is really a commitment to maintain 2 structure fire engines or type 1 engines. And so when we made that decision, then adding the engine, the matching money is intended to come out of capital. As a matter of fact, we've paid for the engine already, right? It's a little over $1 million. You paid for that like 18 months ago now, actually. That came out of the capital fund because it's an expansion of services or equipment available.
You mentioned that doesn't make sense to have 2 different manufacturers. So I realize our existing ones don't match the good that you mentioned, that doesn't match the other one. But why doesn't it make sense to have 2 different manufacturers?
So the current Scott SCBA's, if we had to change out models, it would be incompatible with MSA's and Scott's. We can't cross over those types of things. Masks, regulators, same thing. They're not compatible.
But we could keep them separate, and I know they're not, I guess they're not compatible. You can interchange parts, but can they be just kept separate and then?
Maybe you could describe what happens on like a major structure fire incident when you're replacing bottles and maybe having to come back and fill them and all that.
So the issue we have is twofold. We have what are called rapid intervention teams. Those rapid intervention teams have these universal connections on their hip. When that rapid intervention team is deployed, they have to go in and be able to rescue a downed firefighter or something of that nature. They have to be able to quit connecting and be able to do what's called buddy breathing with the adjoining firefighter that we're assigned to. Currently, we can't do that because of the incompatibility of the 2 different styles of breathing apparatus.
We can't do that with another department.
Another department. So now, for example, if we do that in our department, and we kept one form of breathing apparatus and purchased a new form, we're now creating an issue for ourselves where one engine might, or one crew might have a certain type of breathing apparatus, the new type. The old engine might have the old type. And if we had a firefighter go down, that new crew would come in and not be able to supplement them with air.
So the new truck's gonna have four of this equipment. Why do we need four on one truck?
So you need
Because we obviously
Need-
change our staffing.
total, right, I understand, we need total seated positions. If we have a callback, for example, somebody's coming from their home, and they don't come down and get an engine. Or we have 6 personnel and even if we get some reserves back in the future. We don't wanna have to purchase these again 5 years from now when they're still current. And we'll probably have to do a new style of SCBA that will be on top of the new style, if I'm making any sense. So if we purchase now, we're gonna have a particular model, brand, et cetera. In 5 years, that could change a little bit. And if we don't buy what we need right now to complement what we are looking for in the future, we could run into a problem. So with regards to the question on the number of seats is, we always need a backup in case we have a failure.
Yeah.
So that gives us 3, and that's all we're putting on each engine right now is 3. And then a backup.
Because we have we're gonna have obviously 2 type 1, the wildfire, that's 9. Plus the UTV.
So there's gonna be, 3 on the type 1 engine, 3 on the other type 1 engine, 3 on the type 3 engine, that's 9, 1 on the chief's vehicle, 1 on our utility, and that's 11. Plus, I'd like to have 2 spares at 13.
So let me try to clarify. So again, what's proposed as far as the replacement of the current apparatus would only have 3 on, so the current engines we have would only have 3 SCBAs associated to each one. That's 2 for each of the assigned personnel that we would expect and an extra 1 on the engine. The reason that's proposed to have 4 is we applied for the grant. So we're getting 75% federal funding for this 4th one on the new engine.
Yeah, and then you put it on the other.
So we
Well, it's not, I mean, it could be a spare or whatever, but
Well, we currently have 4 on the engine. Which was 3-0 staffing with a spare. Unfortunately, we've had those spares because we have had some failures in the past where they've dumped that SCBA and gone and gotten the new one. So with 2 people on the engine, we're taking it down to 3 on the engine, but we still have spares, a couple of spares back at the station. Should we have a unit get damaged during a structure fire, a collapse, something falls on it, now we have a spare SCBA back at the station that can go back on that engine while that one goes in and gets repaired.
There's just so much going on right now with fire department. We're getting a new truck, we looking at remodeling it. Change of staffing, there's just so much going on, there's so much variables, and I do appreciate that, I understand we do need them, I'm not saying we don't, and I know kind of. It's one of those things where you make the decision, you don't know when we're getting a fire truck, it comes with new equipment and now everything else has to match and, things like that
I don't want to, we could still purchase with the new engine Scott equipment. That would be compatible with our existing old equipment. It just wouldn't be compatible with the neighboring agency's equipment, correct?
No, because it's a new connection and new universal connections that don't match the old style. So even if we bought new Scott SCBAs,
There's no
they're not compatible with the old style.
there are no adapters or anything.
Yeah.
So then have who, let's go,
I'm sorry, so theoretically, let's just say we outfit the new engine, we reserve the others, and then we stagger replacements, is that a possibility? Over a period of time?
Well, right now, we're having
Can I
critical,
throw something out really quick? I think that's it. I think what we need to look at is the liability. The safety is is the number one factor. The liability we're opening up ourselves up to beyond 15 years is pretty great. We look at the fire service, apparatus above 25 years, turnouts above 10 years, SCBA's at 15 years. Those are big markers. There's a lot of stuff in NFPA that we go, hey, it's a nice guidance document. But when we look at, it's not just NFPA, this is an OSHA requirement. So we get a firefighter that gets injured and they get a respiratory illness or a respiratory injury because we've got it, even though it's a perfectly serviceable SCBA, but it's 15 years and a day old, it really opens up the agency to liability. And I look at if maybe I read it wrong because I thought it was 11, but I was thinking if we're going from 16 to 11, there's already somewhat of a cost savings and we're not replacing all of them. I agree with the chief. You have to have some backup. You have to have a little bit of depth in the event that you have a unit that gets bad, if you're sending somebody off to training and they're taking a unit with them. But I think the bigger thing we should be focused on is the liability. I think having the ability to work with the neighboring agencies is important. That universal connection is universal regardless of what unit we buy. But if we have units right now that don't have the universal connection, they're greater than 15 years old.
Right.
I mean, so I think that's the one thing that's kind of jumping out at me is instead of trying to piecemeal it is making a wholesale change only because the cost, and at least in my experience, long-term with the firefighter injury is well going to exceed $100,000.
well, so Keith kind of stole my thunder on that.
Sorry about that.
That's exactly where I was going is, we do have a liability issue. If we try and mix and match, or if we delay on these any further, it's kind of like, the NFPA requirement of an engine after 25 years or, other PPE. We're setting ourselves up for a liability issue. And we've already had one fail.
And
on
again,
incident.
I'm not saying we shouldn't replace, but we just changed our staffing model down to 2 per shift.
Yeah.
So, and I understand you have to have a backup, but I don't, having one on UTV or having one on the chief's truck, I think we just need to cut back even more on the number. That's how
I
I feel.
completely disagree.
Let
me tell you why. When I was the chief in 2014, it was a much different staffing model. 2 separate times, I was the only Templeton firefighter at the scene, and I was completely relying on CAL FIRE. Had I arrived, unfortunately, one was the structure fire back up where my wife's Aunt Wyman, Debbie, where Debbie lives. It's a street over, actually. The structure fire was that I was first on scene. Fortunately, the homeowners were out. But had they been in by myself, I could have effected a rescue within the 2 in, 2 out policy.
Yep.
Because there was a known person in there. And I had all my gear. So I had all my gear, I had my SCBA in this, and I was able to assist the first engine company of 2 people from CAL FIRE that arrived and pulling another line down and being in smoke, et cetera. So I would recommend we're already reducing a number of them, but
But we're not.
what are you really gonna gain? Because what we're saying is we're willing to reduce the level of service.
No, that's not true.
No, it
We
is,
still-
100% it is.
We still have our existing ones.
But if the chief
So
doesn't have one and he's first on scene of an
you could
incident.
use one of the ones that are,
They're
they're
not
not
there.
there, we currently
They're not-
have.
If the engine or another engine or
engine's
somebody's
here,
not there,
and
he's
he's at
the
the
first
high
on
school.
scene.
How long?
But he
The
could
perfect
use
example
one
is
of the ones
how
that we
long do
have.
you want your family to wait?
He could
So-
use one of the ones that
No,
we.
you're
currently
saying
have.
steal one off the other engine?
Yeah, no, not, use the existing one, use the ones that we have right now that are, because you said there are 12 of them that are serviceable. And they could last, so it's just that there's so much going on with the fire, our fire department that it just, and that engine, the second engine could go anytime.
Well, I
And we
understand,
need the
but
second one, so.
there is a,
And there could be new ones coming with, if we ever get a new engine, there'll be new ones on that engine as well, so it's.
are you insinuating that we keep one of the old ones for the chief's rig?
Yeah, or as,
But we
yeah.
just.
But then it's incompatible.
But hang on, but you just said it's outside of the 15.
It's outside of the
Not
15
all of
year.
them, not all of them, there are
If
some.
they don't
that-
have, they don't have the universal connection, I would bet a paycheck that they are outside of the 15 year. Because
And not only that, but what if I go in and effect a rescue and I go down? And they can't connect to me now to get me out. Now I'm using an outdated and I do survive, and then I come back and I say, well, because of the decision of this group or this committee or this board, I now have lung damage.
I
And-
think we're going into scenarios that are going to be.
Well-
Almost never, I mean, I know you mentioned it,
I just.
but, how many times does that happen?
I have been on
I'm
3
just-
structure
I'm
fires.
just really concerned with the funding of the fire department.
I've been on
and-
3 structure fires in the last 5 years that I've been there first.
And our existing ones, they have worked, so if we,
Well, they're in service. They currently work right now.
yeah.
It's not a lack of their ability to work.
I just think
It's the consistency of working with the other agencies. It's the liability of their age. We now know that they're expired and they're outside, so we're working outside those parameters. And I don't know what your business is, but I'm certain there's things in your business that, hey, if it's at a certain year, and I'll use Diablo to be a great example. 2-3 months ago, they were getting rid of $1 million sets of gaskets because they no longer meet NRC's requirement. But they're in perfect condition, they look perfectly fine, but that's what the requirement is. And something happened, the liability is so great, they're not willing to take that risk. And I kind of look at the same thing as, we shouldn't be taking the liability for it, because this is pretty inexpensive. And my other question, and it's maybe a little outside of this, is what is the future costing over the next, 5 to 10 years with that account, as far as, what's the replacement schedule for radios and all the other things that go along? Is there a replacement fund?
Yeah, I can attempt to answer that. The asset replacement fund isn't built based on a forecasted future replacement. It's built based on the depreciation of existing assets. So, for example, when the new engine arrives, it'll be depreciated over a period of 15 years. And so its cost will be repaid into that asset replacement over the 15-year period.
So there's a plan in place.
There's a plan in place, but it's insufficient, and that's why we have too small of a balance now.
Yeah.
And we know 15 years from now that the engine will cost more to replace than it costs today. We're not there yet, right? We can't afford to the fund cannot afford to make larger asset replacement contributions, but really that asset replacement fund is too small. Again, if we had $3-4 million in there, I'd feel much more comfortable, because I'd say, hey, a piece of equipment could go down tomorrow and we could replace it the next day. Well, we don't have that luxury today, because we have assets, let's say we have $3-5 million of assets that eventually need to be replaced. We only got $900,000.
I think the one thing I'm concerned about is, I feel like, and I'm probably being a little more bold because of my impending retirement, but I feel like I'm being micromanaged as the industry professional on what the department needs. And I think it's important to understand that I am absolutely not willing to cut corners and put somebody in a liable situation or in a bad situation. And I wish the committee would understand that this isn't this would be nice. We're getting to a critical failure point of all these breathing apparatus. And it's beyond a money thing to me. It's a liability thing.
No, I agree. And I know it takes the proper equipment, the proper apparatus to run a fire department. And it's just that we're not trying to micromanage you, but we have a fund. And I just announced Tuesday meeting, we need to sit down and try to see what we could do with the fire funds, because it's in bad shape. I don't really want to hand over the keys to CAL FIRE. So I'm trying really hard and I'm worried, I don't sleep at nights. It's like, what are we gonna do with our fire department 4 or 5 years from now?
I guarantee you, CAL FIRE won't take us.
Well, I know, so we need to be very judicious with our funding right now. And I am not saying that we don't need these, but I think we need a better plan in place to replace these, maybe over the next 3 or 4 years, rather than just come do it all at once. As I said, we have a lot of decisions that we have to make in terms of the fire department, in terms of the truck that's coming in. We gotta see where, and then how much money we're gonna end up having our asset, and then what's gonna happen with that truck. So we just have to, I'm just saying, we just need to slow down.
Well, and I have, and with all due respect, I've slowed down significantly below my point of comfort with $101,753. Because the previous replacements were in the $200,000 range. So I've cut it in half. I mean, I don't know how much further down,
No, and that's.
how much more I can cut the bone to the
I think the
bone.
question is, or if this is the most creative we can get to it, then that is.
It literally is. The general manager and I sat down in the last few days and I've cut this down to below my comfort level, but acceptable, I guess.
But I mean, again, we change our staffing, we're going to 2.0 model right now, and
But I mean, you
just the number
don't
of
get,
spares that we're gonna have.
it's
I
not
think
spares. What you don't understand is the way engines are deployed. So as Keith mentioned, one engine can go to a Atascadero, I can have another crew come back in. Those bottles, everything else, the Rick pack and everything are gone in a Atascadero out of fire. Okay, that next engine can get called out to a fire here in town, need all of that equipment, and we're calling back some folks to that equipment. Plus, we would need our type 3 to come back. We can staff those right now currently. And we would need all of that equipment. And if we had individuals show up from other departments, they could use some of our equipment if we run out of air bottles in packs.
I've said my piece, so I guess the committee needs.
I mean, at this point, I understand for the money's sake, there's no way, we have whittled it down. So I mean, there's,
Significantly.
from this point is basically to go to records. See what we can do.
And I completely understand. I understand the situation and long term, yeah, it doesn't look super great. I really feel that there's just a handful of things that are very important. They're just talking about. If it was radios, sure, we maybe can push the radios.
Yeah.
But one of the big challenges and especially in the fire service, and I'm sure in a lot of industry, is a lot of the things that they're not making the replacement parts as well. So I'm surprised that they even have units that old that are in service, because really at the 10-year mark, they stopped making replacement parts for it. I know in the previous agencies I've worked for, we ran into that with radios, we ran that with EKGs, where you just can't get them repaired because they can't get the parts. So.
And I know I was sitting with the general manager 2 days ago and told him the same thing. I don't know if he really believed me, but that 10-year mark is exactly what he just said. They stopped making replacement parts. Now they have parts that they'll keep on the shelf, but then they run out of those parts. And at what point are we gonna send it back in? They're gonna be like, sorry, we can't fix this.
I guess the other question is more long-term planning. Let's say we were to move forward with this $100,000. Is there a better option for us to start planning out staggered replacement costs rather than all at once, so it hits that funded time?
I highly.
So like, this is a one-time thing that we have to kind of suck up. We understand that, but in the future, I don't want to be in the point where we're at 15 years, we have to do a full replacement again. Whereas we say, let's say at 10 years, we replace a third of them.
Well, I think on this type of stuff, to keep consistency.
Well, no, in this case, we're not talking about for the engine, we're talking about what we currently have.
Yeah, I think so, Pat, if the asset replacement fund were to have been working properly and adhered to in 10, 15 years ago, I I think the way that this replacing it all at once is actually preferred. It hits the books.
Yes.
Essentially, what the asset replacement fund is sort of a mandatory savings account. It's kind of like if you're at home and you say, hey, I don't want to make a car payment next time I replace my car, so I'm going to start putting money into this savings account right now. And then when I need to replace my car, I grab that savings account and I just buy a car. And then I keep that process going and I never have to make a payment. That's kind of how this asset replacement account is intended to work. If we had enough money set aside, you'd be able to make that purchase 15 years from now comfortably because there'd be sufficient funds. We've struggled to get there. We've made voluntary contributions to asset replacement and we've used the engine reimbursement costs from out of county assignments and we've dumped that into asset replacement costs to get it, asset replacement fund to get it to where we are. So that at least we have we have the $900,000-ish in there now. So what is gonna happen is if you move forward, so ignore just a moment, ignore the new 4 or 3 or 4, whatever come with the new engine, ignore that just for a moment. The asset replacement items, that $100,000 comes out of the asset replacement account, but every year you're gonna be kicking in something like $10,000 to backfill it. And that means over time, it should have about the same consequence, whether you stagger it or you make all the purchases at once, it hits your operating account basically at the same pace. Because you're setting aside those funds.
And to add to that, it is really better and more advantageous to have all of the same style, same year units. That way they're compatible. There's no issues with parts. Half of the stock that we have or units that we have are 1 year and the other half are another year. They're all compatible and same, so that one lump. Now, what I would agree with is you don't want to do like all your turnouts and your SCBAs at the same interval. Stagger that type of stuff, helmets and boots and gloves and that type of stuff. Yeah, that needs to be staggered, and that's what I've tried to do.
I think the difficulty is that when we do a single purchase here, it's kind of like we're in a difficult position because of the funding for the fire.
Yes.
Making this large purchase it hurts.
But
And so it's absolutely necessary. And so the reasoning behind looking at staggered or whatever not is to ease the pain of a significant amount of money.
totally agree. Yeah.
And so I'm not opposed to spending it on the SCBA's. I just think that it's difficult for us to digest that and also at the same time say, hey, we have.
I totally agree. But, and again, over the last, and correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers, but over the last 5 years or 4 years since we've been going out of county, we probably put 300,000 into that asset replacement account by the out of county funds.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact numbers. This year was
Roughly.
more than the other years, but because it was like a 30-day assignment, but
I mean, my thought is even if we could reduce that amount by 3 or 4, and then go apply for grants again next year because, pardon me?
We're not gonna get them.
Well, you said that before we weren't getting them because of the date, they weren't quite 15 years, so they're gonna be 15 years. So, applying for grants again, maybe that would be a possibility, so. I mean, I'm just trying to think out of the box. Again, I'm not saying we don't need them, but just trying to save some money. And if we, like, I know you have 13 on there, a total, 9 + 4. Again, if we cut them down to 9 maybe, and then see if we could apply again for another grant next year. When is the grant open up?
Doesn't open up until November.
Well, although in theory it sounds good, but it'll be challenging because they're gonna wanna know, since the last time you bought SCBA's, what's the nexus? What's driving you to request, $10,000, $20,000? They're looking at, and it's also what the spirit is. Typically every year, it's like, oh, it's communications this year, it's cancer prevention, it's turnouts, it's SCBA. So they usually have a flavor of what they're looking to be able to fund. And if you're in an off year, that's challenging. And then the other part is they're gonna look at, well, you've just bought, your agency's just bought SCBA's. Why are we buying just a couple of SCBA's? And mind you, you're competing against 100,000 other fire departments that are putting grants in. So It's not that you can't go for the grant, it's just your opportunity to be able to get it successfully, it really declines.
So three things he brought up were the cycle, and AFG has been the last 2 years high prioritizing SCBA's, and we haven't gotten them. This year, that's falling off, and they're gonna high prioritize some other type of PPE. So when that falls off, it's more difficult to go after something that they previously put as a high priority. The second thing is they ask, do you have funding in place, or is there funding? And what is that funding for replacement of this? Well, if I come back and say, well, yeah, we have $800,000, but we gotta use that for other stuff, that, it just doesn't look good. They're gonna say, well, you have money, you just need to prioritize. And that's why we've been losing a lot of them.
I just want to address, just so that all the committee members are totally aware of how the numbers work. So just take for just a second, the new engine and the 4 that are associated with that, because those are 75% funded through our Kinetic congressional designation that's being administered to the USDA. So those 4, while they're here today at the same time, because we want these to be all compatible, they really need to be all compatible. Those are kind of separate. I want to make sure everyone's clear on the replacement units and why the numbers are, and I'll tell you what I view as if there is an optional one where it is. So I'm in total agreement that at a minimum, there needs to be 3 on each of the engines, because we have 2 staff members. We expect 2 staff members on the engines. That's our current staffing level, and 1 essentially backup unit that's with them we're on scene. If we were to change our staffing model, we would likely need to be adding another SCBA to each of these engines at that time in the future. So that's 6 of the SCBAs for those 2 engines. We already spoke about the chief's vehicle. That was never a question in my mind. The chief is occasionally the first person on scene and almost always on scene on a major incident. And at that point, he'll be 1 of 3. It could very well come into play that he may need to don that equipment and assist to get a firefighter out or assist with a rescue. But again, we only have 3 people at that point with the engine, the 2 persons on the engine, and the chief at a major incident until other resources arrive. So I don't think that one should be considered optional at all. There was talk about the spares. The spares that stay in the station are really to replace one when the other one goes out of service for repair or whatever. When these get sent off to be serviced, it can backfill one of the ones on the engine. That's why it's necessary. The chief's suggesting that one of the spares is essentially purchased with asset replacement. A second spare comes kind of as a part of the new engine and the 75% funding. If there's an optional one that's less likely to ever be used, it's this one that's assigned to the utility, because that would be used in the circumstance when there was a callback and all the other equipment was gone and a person arrived alone, like a firefighter arrived alone, could take that utility to a scene. At that point, they could bring their turnout with them and the SCBA could be kept in that piece of equipment. Or in a circumstance such as the chief is unavailable and one of the other captains is essentially serving as it's kind of a watch, kind of a oversight of the department during that time, and would be responding directly from their home with that piece of equipment. Again, that is expected to occur less frequently, but nonetheless, that occurrence could occur. And I think what you're hearing is that, so if that circumstance were to occur again, not that it would be frequent, but if that individual, let's say it's Captain Goldblum, who shows up, who's got that piece of apparatus at home because the chief was out of commission for some period of time and shows up to the scene, happens to be the first person arriving, they could make entry to make a rescue if there was a known person inside the structure. And without it, they could not.
Let me ask you, Tom, I mean, based on how you explain it and the concern with the number of staff, what if the spare, you know, was just removed from this initial purchase and you're gonna rely on that, the new engine's fourth unit is being the spare and just having a single spare, knowing that you've got one in the utility that could be pulled, you've got, you know, you've got a little bit of flexibility.
So 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. 2 spares. I mean, it's taken it way below my comfort level, but I mean, if that's the hinge factor, yeah, we could reduce it by 1. We're talking a difference of $90,000 and $100,000.
No, I realize it's not that much. Michael, you can say something?
Yeah, I gotta go with Tom's thought, you know, that one extra one, who knows what can happen out there. I mean, it's, I don't like playing around with somebody's safety, especially a firefighter. But I understand that it's needed. I have to agree with what Tom thinks he needs is 9 to be replaced, because if we're not compatible to the other agencies around us, then we're in a bubble. And why be in that bubble of our own different ones, being whether it be the Scots or the new ones? With mutual aid being more and more of a factor, I think, in this area, and with, you know, having to go out of county and stuff for assignments, I hope and pray that they go out with the equipment that they need and it works. I know it just doesn't feel right in my mind, and I'm just I don't wanna agree. That one extra one, maybe we can do it this way. I don't know. You know, maybe buy the 8 and then look at 6 months, 9 months down the road. I don't know, maybe next year's budget. I don't know if it's been put together yet. And purchase 1 or 2 more. There's a lot of things we can do. But it's all gonna be up to, I think, the recommendation of the chief and this committee.
I mean, the way we're trying to set this up right now is we're trying to make this purchase all at one time. And so we have all the units coming, including the 4 for the new engine. We're probably not gonna be paying for these. We might have to do a 10% deposit. We're probably not gonna be paying for these until we receive them next year. But it's the order and the lead time that is the issue on these. 20-week lead time. I can't just go, hey, I need an SCBA off the shelf because we just had 2 destroyed in a fire. And now I don't have any extras.
Basically, by ordering it now or and stuff, the lead time would be just about the time when the engine arrives.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to go with that. I understand that.
Got no issues with it. I think it's just gonna hurt on where it looks at as just money. And I understand that. Maybe we get creative with some other items down the road. But this is basically an officer safety issue where we have to have, and as you stated, we have that mutual aid.
Yeah, because just to, actually, you probably had to use quite a bit of SBAs during the grain fire until you pull everybody out, right?
Constantly. Yeah, I mean, we probably had 12 packs in use at that point, and we went through several bottles. We actually ran down here, got the utility, came back, filled bottles and with our unit here and brought bottles back.
And that's time between, even though that it was only a block and a half away, yeah, that's time consuming. Rather than calling CAL FIRE for their breathing support unit and doing it right on scene.
We eventually got that, but
It takes time.
Yeah.
I'd say the committee, my recommendation would be the committee to go ahead and authorize the 9 now. And then be somewhat creative in the next few months or next year's budget to look at the extras, the others that are needed later on, because if we change our staffing levels in the next year or two, who knows, we're gonna need something.
Let me see if I can get some concurrence from the committee for something here. So just to be clear, the recommendation or what we're requesting from the committee is to make a recommendation to the board of directors, because the board would have to approve authorization to make the purchase or amend the budget. There are really two issues. They're separate, but they're tied together because there's really a need to ensure that any SCBA's that are purchased are compatible with one another, right? So the SCBA's that come on the new engine are compatible with the other SCBA's in the department. So it's recommended that 9 of them be replaced, asset replacement funds, and 9 plus this RIT PAC and apologize, I don't know what that acronym stands
Rapid
for.
Intervention Team.
PAC, that's a rescue of a firefighter piece of equipment. We have an existing RIT PAC, but it's not compatible with the new what's proposed. It's compatible with the existing SCBA's. So those together cost about $102,000. We're looking for concurrence, we're looking for a committee to make a recommendation to the board regarding that, and then separately that the same units be purchased for the new engine. And again, the funding from that would come, 75% would come from the USDA grant, 25% would come from the district's capital fund. The capital fund will have to front the money because the grant is a reimbursement basis. That's about $57,000. So about 15,000 of that would be at the end of the day would be the district's expense out of the capital account. Doesn't affect the asset replacement. Once these assets are booked to the district in the district system, there'll be about $160,000 worth of new assets that are placed in the district's asset listing, and that'll be depreciated over time and force or cause, or your policy would say you're gonna make a contribution back into asset replacement to essentially rebuild that account over a period of years out of the operating fund. So yeah, ultimately this decision will affect the district's asset replacement fund, the capital fund, and the operating fund in terms of making the asset replacement contributions to rebuild or replenish that fund over time. So I hope I haven't made it too confusing, but that's what's before you. And then in your next item, we'll talk about all the other equipment that's associated with the engine other than SCBA's, or including SCBA's, I suppose.
So yeah, basically you're saying that whatever money we spend now, it'll come out of the operations eventually.
It does over time, yes. Yes, whenever you buy something using anything, the policy is that once it hits the books and it's depreciated, the operating fund has to replenish that asset replacement account. So that's how it affects the
So
operation.
this would be about 10,000 a year.
If it's well, let's just if it's depreciated over 10 years, it would be about 16,000 a year come together.
But then we also have what's going on to the new engine. Those would have to get money. as well.
Not everything on the new engine, not all that equipment that you look at next.
CDA.
Yeah, well, that $16,000 figure includes the new engine SCBA's because it's.
But it should be over 15 years, because they are good they do.
Yeah, I don't
have
think
life.
well, I mean, so the accounting system wants you to make sure that everything's fully depreciated before the usable life is up.
Oh,
So,
okay, okay.
you know, if it should last 15, you don't necessarily want to be depreciating it for potentially longer. It's kind of like if you're saving up for a new car, you want to make sure you have enough set aside so that you can actually buy it when the time comes.
$160,000 over 15 years. So inflation and whatnot.
Okay, so because I think there's some, maybe it's not obvious to me that we have complete concurrence here. I would request that if the committee members are ready to do this, maybe you do so more formally. And you would make a motion and be seconded, you'd cast a vote, and since we have a primary resident here, the alternate resident wouldn't have an actual vote, and I apologize for making that more formal, but it doesn't appear to me that we have necessarily complete concurrence.
Understandable.
Yeah, I mean, I would make a motion that we fund the asset replacement for all 11 of the SCBA's as the chief has requested.
It's 13.
Nine plus the 4.
It's 9 for asset replacement and then four new ones.
Oh, okay, okay.
Sorry, we've thrown around too many numbers here. But you could maybe
Okay.
suggest it as the report indicates, or if that's.
Yeah, just as the report indicates, and so it would just, it would include both for the new rig and the current inventory.
The new rig is 75% funded,
Yes,
so it's not the full 57. It's
about 15.
So we'd be looking at about 115,000 for us at repair.
Well. So
Ish.
just to, yeah, the
Okay, so
15,000, the 25%, and I don't wanna muddy the waters here unless it's helpful. The matching funds for the new engine are coming out of capital, not out of asset replacement, because it's a new facility. But it all affects the operation eventually.
They all come from
Yes.
the operation.
Eventually.
It comes
Eventually.
from operation.
Eventually.
Operation, we just passed, the staffing we passed was $65,000 in deficit spending. And, we keep adding to it. It's gonna be like, I don't know, it's gonna get ugly. And until we figure out what we're doing with our budget, I'm just not comfortable, so. But anyway, and as I said, we have a budget going, we're trying to figure out the budget, so. But I understand.
I'll second. I know, I realize that the money is a lot, but I wanna do wanna bring it before the board. I wanna figure out whether the board can, but I do agree with this idea, we have to review the fire's budget. And we have to get creative with other items in order to reel that one in. But at this time, this is an officer safety related issue that we need to take care of the individuals who we have employed here and who provide us with this service.
And just for discussion real quick, I almost kind of wish that these were two separate, that the new engine SCBA was a completely separate. I think that's the challenge, and although it will need to be replaced, over the 15-year period or 12-year, 10-year, or whatever but I think that's what kind of muddies it up a little bit, and how the funding is gonna be, where they, instead of being one, just having two separate. That's just a perspective.
And again, it comes from operations, so if we ran out of money in operations, I don't think we could, that's it, and we only have 400,000 in operations, so. So all this money that we have in the capital asset, everything, because we dedicated to be spending on certain things, we can't, go back and pull that money away from those accounts, so. We have $400,000 that we have to deal with, and as I said, the $65,000 deficit spending actually started now. So I'm concerned what's gonna happen with the fire department in like 2029, 2030.
Hey, just a quick question, just for my own knowledge, did the board vote to fund and have the current type 1 remain as a backup?
Reserve.
As a reason, okay.
We've had too many instances where that engine's gone down.
You don't have to sell me on it, I was just curious on it.
And we've only had the type 3, which is
Yeah.
500.
I'm thinking we probably have to replace that truck in less than 3 to 5 years, probably.
Probably about 5 years, yeah, or that's where you could potentially get creative.
Yeah,
And-
run it to end of life.
Huh?
Yeah, I'd run it to end of life. I'd run it in the ground.
Well, and that-
Or look
and
even
or-
having just a,
You buy another used engine, you have some other options available.
Get a
You
cheap
literally do a
refurb.
frame off refurb on it, which would be a fraction of the cost of a new engine. You know, but that would be motor trans, drivetrain, I mean, it would be a frame off reefer. I mean, and that's where you get creative and then just keep that thing as the reserve engine with the frame off reefer. I mean, those are the areas where you can get creative. And then see what happens in the next 15 years.
Yeah, Chair, there's been a motion and a second.
Yeah,
Call for a vote.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call it. So Axon,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
and Fredonish.
No.
With the updates to type 1 engine order, receive an update on the status and progress with the engine, including equipment and outfit.
So the type 1 engine, I've kind of given and this is just the equipment, the engine itself is can kind of roll those into one. We're looking at going back potentially the first part of March or the first part of April for a pre-construction meeting to start the what will be very few changes because we've essentially done the engine build per se to match the design that actually the city of Atascadero just did with what's called a Pierce Enforcer puck. And so that's the model style of engine we're going to get. The only changes we're going to be able to do is go back there and look at certain cab configuration and very limited on that, but then cabinetry configuration. So boxes, how the compartments are configured, and certain other smaller items with regards to door placement and those types of things. So by going back, they'll show us current builds in progress, give us ideas on where we can put things, how we can put things. That's the engine status. And then
Expected delivery would be.
and expected delivery would be September, October of 26.
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
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 How did you get to the front of the line?
We ordered it over a year ago.
We wrote $1 million check.
Well, but it's
I wrote $1.3 million check and I'm looking at 2030.
yeah, no, but it's not a, I mean, you got.
I know we're getting industrial engine,
Yeah,
it's
you're-
different, but still, that's
Custom.
fantastic. I think that's fantastic.
So it's gonna be the lead time that they predicted, you know, which is
28 months, I think.
28 or 29 months, close to it. By the time we made the purchase to the time we receive it, it'll be close. Close to that. So quick overview. With that engine comes the equipment. And the equipment originally I thought was gonna be close to 300,000. We've kind of whittled some things down to the point where we're looking at the 232,000 to purchase all the equipment. The spreadsheet that I gave you, although it doesn't have any details on it, one of the engineers is putting together a detailed spreadsheet on every tool, every piece of equipment. And we're really looking at refining it down and getting exactly what we need, nothing more. And then making sure it's fully complemented. That way, if we have that engine go to, a fire in the county or Paso or Cascadero, and we have a crew come back that covers the second engine, they have a full complement. So it'll be ready to respond. That came to, a cost of, like I said, $132,000. And what we did was, all these red numbers is we pulled out the most critical items with the longest lead times, specialty items that, you don't just get off the shelf, and ones that are expected to have price increases as of July 1. And we're recommending that these be authorized to be purchased ahead of the July 1 fiscal year budget. That way we can lock in the prices, lock in the purchase time. That would allow these items to get here before the engine gets here. Because obviously if the engine gets here and we don't have the equipment to put on it, it doesn't do us any good. Again, like I say, the key factor, the lead times, the price increases, many of the components are, again, these aren't the off-the-shelf type tools that we can just order and then get a couple weeks later. These are significant lead times. And then we would be able to place the engine in service immediately. So for the fiscal year 2025-26, I'm asking for authorization of $152,500 to make those purchases. This would be coming out of capital. And then the remaining for the 26-27 budget would be roughly $80,000.
And this is inclusive of the SCBA's in the
Correct.
second RIT pack. And so that's included in these totals. And then again, keep in mind, just like we talked about with the SCBA's for the new engine, this equipment will be, is expected to be 75% reimbursed by the USDA.
Correct.
Funds. We'll front the money and get it back.
Is there a reimbursement schedule?
Well,
Upon receipt of the engine.
well, I
Just the engine, not the equipment?
everything. No, it has to be
Everything,
complete.
everything.
Everything, it has to be, when we requested a fully outfitted engine, it's gotta be everything. And so the idea is to get all this equipment here in the weeks leading up to the engine delivery. So when the engine comes, it can be put all on the engine and put in service, and then we can submit reimbursement from USDA. I can't commit to how fast that's gonna go. My experience is it'll be much slower than we'd like, but it shouldn't be more than next fiscal year, more than several months instead of years.
So at 152, we're still just looking at 25%.
So the total between the two fiscal year purchases is about $232,000. So again, roughly 60,000 in net out of the capital account, and the rest will be reimbursed from the USDA grant. And it's possible, in order to get many items orders, we're gonna have to issue like a purchase order or a commitment to purchase. So we've asked for a budget amendment for the current year. It's possible that a lot of those funds will have to be carried over into next year's budget anyways, because we won't actually cut the check until September or October or whenever the equipment arrives. But in order to get the equipment on order, we'll have to commit to making that purchase.
This fiscal, next fiscal.
Yeah, in the next couple of months for the items in red.
Yeah, most of this would be purchase orders.
Yep.
And it wouldn't come out of the. We
There's
wouldn't
guaranteed
lose any
within
cap.
that. Yes,
You're just committing to purchase when it comes. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'll second it.
Oh,
Bardonish, Paxton,
Yes.
and Morrison.
aye. Next on our agenda is the fire station expansion update.
So currently we, as I mentioned last time, we went out to, county permit We got our first round of comments back. Those comments, there were about 30 items. They've all been addressed. The last item we're remaining on is the name of our special inspector. I've reached out to Geo Solutions, a guy named Rob, and he's gonna give me a letter identifying the name that will go onto the plans that will go back to the county, and we'll resubmit and hopefully have no more comments after that, and get a set of get a permit, and then ask the board to go out to bid and see what the actual costs are gonna be for the station expansion at that point.
Do you have a timeline? Estimate?
I wish I could say, the county,
County's too slow.
I really wish I could say, they have been really unpredictable. They have gone through planners like socks.
Yeah, I mean, with any elect a second term, I mean, much quicker. It really depends if we've adequately addressed all of the comments and whether it needs to go back for a third review, et cetera. But there should be no reason to delay bringing the, once we have I'll call it a permittable project. Then you can decide if, actually, the architect can give us their feedback in terms of what they think what's happened with the cost estimates. Support a bid package. There'll be some costs involved in that, but to actually obtain written sealed bids for the project. Something you would actually be able to award on as opposed to just an estimate. So I think if we were in that spot in a couple months, I'd be very impressed. I don't think it'll be that quick, but.
I would, if I had to put a time frame on it, I would say maximum 3 months to get some type of answer. Could be sooner.
Last item is any future items?
Yeah, I don't have any future items right now. I would just close with the caveat. I agree. The fire department's in a financial quandary, and we need to figure out something to fully fund the fire department. The way I think the community wants it to be funded. I don't know what that looks like right now. But I think it's an absolute necessity. If we're gonna have a viable fire department, because again, there are so many departments that are exiting the CAL FIRE, that's what I'm looking for, agreement, because of their costs. They're going through the roof. And we can't afford it. So keeping this fire department viable is really the only option. Yeah, it's a tough spot, but I think, as I mentioned during the annual report, we as a community, you as a board or a committee, are going to have to start prioritizing what the finances look like and what's the most important thing to fund.
It's the only thing I'd bring up, is there a plan in place for replacing Tom when he retires in July?
So we've made a request to the city of Atascadero to determine if they are interested and at what cost to provide those services. Otherwise, I think we briefed this committee on so that's one option. We don't know if it's an available option, to be quite honest. I don't have a hard and firm answer. We're gonna, at some point in the near future, kind of run out of time because of Tom's retirement is slated for July. And then at that point, we could either, or before then, decide to recruit for a fire chief, either a full-time or a part-time fire chief. We've kind of put our eggs in the basket of, hey, we think it's a more reliable solution to have a contract with another agency to provide something less than full-time services here, rather than just have a part-time employee, but that option still does remain. It's just not a great option.
So I guess that was, well, I guess, what are we gonna be informed, the committee is gonna be informed, we bring it to the board?
That's the information I have.
Oh, okay.
I don't have the
As-
information on
I
the
mean, as
casket.
Updates.
Oh, sure, I could inform the committee and the board. I mean, I don't, I think the issue with the Tascadero is we're gonna reach a point in the not too distant future that if they haven't said, yes, this is something we wanna do or are willing to do, we wouldn't be able to put a program in place to have it effective in July. We'd have no choice but to move forward with recruitment for the position. That doesn't mean that you can't still evaluate some options, but we were blessed to get some ample notice, and so at least allows us to explore some things, but it's been a couple months now and don't have an answer. And I'm not, that's not necessarily the fault of the city of Atascadero. It's a significant ask, and my request has been like, this needs to work for a decent period of time, not for a couple weeks, in order for us to put the resources to make it happen. So I don't think I have, it doesn't sound like we have any necessarily future specific items or a future specific date. We can wait until we have some material matters, maybe update on the station and more concrete information about the engine and schedule a replacement meeting, and I'll make sure to include on that a fire chief succession item, so we can discuss that in more detail at your next meeting.
Aaron, follows you up.